Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to News Dose. And over the weekend, we got more information that indicates Xbox might have yet another major announcement for their multi-platform plans. Though I will say that I think there are still some questions for this one. First off, I think there's actually multiple ways that you can view this, though if this actually happens, then I think Nintendo fans specifically are going to be very, very happy. This could be quite the reunion. Now, we also have some PlayStation news, as it sounds like they have some fun plans in February, so make sure to stay tuned for all of that as well. First, though, I do want to thank my supporters on Patreon and on YouTube memberships. Thank you just so much for your support, and you will receive this video through early access. Let's just go and get right into things, though, starting off with Bioware as they continue to trend in, I'd say, a concerning direction. There's been a lot of masquerades about how this studio is doing after the release of Dragon Age: The Veilguard. There was a lot of back and forth early on, but, we're here for the truth. And over the last couple of weeks, I think we pretty much got our answer, just not overly forthcoming from Bioware themselves. Ultimately, after the release of The Veilguard, the director left the studio, and now we have reports that the entire writing team has since been laid off. And that was one of the biggest issues that fans had with The Veilguard. EA also moved over several other employees to other EA-based studios, and to just kind of top things off, we just got a new report that BioWare has shifted down below 100 employees. So, on paper, none of these seem to be great signs after EA already confirmed that the Veilguard did not meet their internal expectations. So, my take on this is that BioWare can lie to us as much as they want. They claim that all of this is to be agile as they work on Mass Effect. But the reality of the situation is that BioWare released 3, not 1, not 2, but 3 AAA games in a row that didn't meet EA's expectations. As we've seen time and time again in the game industry, there are repercussions for that. And that's what I think we're ultimately seeing here. Honestly, I feel like BioWare as a studio should feel somewhat lucky here just because EA is at least showing them some form of patience. That's probably because they're hoping Mass Effect is a big enough name to turn the ship around for them. But we've seen other studios go under because of one single flop. Meanwhile, BioWare has 3 in a row. And I think Mass Effect 4 will be their last opportunity to deliver on what fans expect from this historical RPG studio. Now, we do actually have some good news for you RPG fans out there, though, because it looks like we got an early Game of the Year candidate being Kingdom Come: Deliverance 2. The long-awaited RPG sequel will release on February 4th, and just ahead of its launch, its reviews are rolling out. And check it out. It currently has an 87 overall score on Metacritic with 50 total reviews. And now, I've heard some reviewers, such as Fextra Life, go so far as to say that this is one of the best games that they've played in a very, very long time. Yeah, sign me up for some of that. The story sounds interesting, they improved the realistic combat, and thankfully, it seems like the performance is rather solid as well. That's really good to hear because that was one of the main issues with the first game when it initially launched. Just to kind of put things into perspective here, though, the first game received a 76 overall score. So, by all indication, this is a much better launch and a big step up in terms of quality. The only thing is that I know a lot of people are going to ask this. Do you need to play the first game before you play the sequel? And the way I view this is that it really just kind of depends on how much you want to know about the previous story. You do play as the same protagonist, but if you do decide to skip out in the first one, Warhorse Studio took a page out of The Witcher 3's book, and they included a summary of the story to begin the sequel. So critics are saying that you don't necessarily need to play the first game, but just something to note here, they also said the same thing about Psychonauts 2, which I don't necessarily agree with. Yes, you can go in and enjoy it without playing the first game, but I think it is much better if you know the story prior. So, like I said, I think it just kind of depends on the person. Either which way, though, this appears to be one of the first really good games of 2025. Alright, so let's go talk about Xbox's multi-platform plan, because this is still very much an unraveling story. I mean, I think by this point, we pretty much know that there's no red line when it comes to their franchises. They could port any Xbox franchise, whether that be Halo, Gears, Forza, or whatever, to rival platforms at any point. But there is still a mystery about their future lineup of games. Titles like Fable, Perfect Dark, Gears of War E-Day, etc., etc. What's going to happen with those games? I mean, so far, what they've mostly done is that they've launched their Xbox Studio developed games as Xbox exclusives. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they won't port them over eventually. Again, there's no red line. But these are games specifically published by Xbox Game Studios. Games like Hellblade 2 and Avowed fall under that list. Both of those games are launching as Xbox exclusives, whereas Bethesda games, they seem to be much more fluid, and then Activision Blizzard, it seems like they're viewed as multi-platform. Well, it's since been discovered through a job listing by The Initiative, which is an Xbox game studio, included a job requirement in a recent Perfect Dark job listing that they'll need to optimize and ensure the scalability of the rendering features to support multiple platforms and quality settings. Now, there's been a lot of speculation about this job listing, though technically, I will say that this could just be referring to the Xbox Series S, the Series X, PC, and maybe their next Xbox console as well. I mean, it is a rather vague requirement to simply say multiple platforms. I mean, that could mean a lot of different things. But with everything that we currently know about Xbox's multi-platform plans, again, all of this information is still unraveling, but this obviously, without a doubt, has sparked a lot of speculation online that Perfect Dark could be yet another multi-platform game. In fact, one of the reasons that people are getting excited about this is because the Perfect Dark series started on the Nintendo 64 as an exclusive title. So, I mean, if there's any already announced Xbox game that I think could draw a lot of interest on, let's say the Nintendo Switch 2, then I'd say Perfect Dark would be that game. I mean, Rareware was such a huge part of Nintendo back during the 90s with games like Banjo-Kazooie, Perfect Dark, Killer Instinct, Conker, Battletoads, Jet Force Gemini, and the list just kind of goes on and on and on. So this would be a significant reunion for Nintendo and for their longtime fans, much like we saw for the announcement of Banjo-Kazooie in Smash Bros. Now, with that said, despite the rampant speculation online, I'm personally still not convinced that this job listing confirms that Perfect Dark will launch on the Switch 2 and the PlayStation 5. Like I said, it's a rather vague requirement, and, it could mean several different things. Now, I will say this much, though. I'm 100% expecting Xbox to support the Switch 2 in a major way when they start to reveal its games. And even if Perfect Dark isn't a launch title alongside the Xbox version, I mean, it wouldn't shock me if Xbox takes a timed exclusive approach and eventually ports it to other platforms later down the line. I mean, I think that's one of the big mysteries when it comes to Xbox right now. Will they start doing timed exclusives for pretty much all of their games, or will they just have some games that are flat out exclusive and it'll stay that way? There's still a lot of questions that comes along with all this, but when you have a plan like this in place, yeah, there's going to be speculation like we're seeing with this job listing. I mean, we'll see what happens with all this. Let me know your opinion in the comments below, but I'll keep you updated as this multi-platform story continues to unravel. Okay, now as far as PlayStation goes, it sounds like a PlayStation State of Play is imminent for the month of February. This comes from Nate the Hate, which recently leaked the Nintendo Switch 2 reveal date. He was also the one that broke news for Hi-Fi Rush on other consoles last year, so I mean, yeah, he's done a pretty good job with leaks. And according to him, a State of Play is planned for February, which I don't think should be overly surprising. Sony's held a State of Play in the month of February every year since 2021, and even before that, they still like the month of March as well. So, with that in mind, I think even without this leak, we could have easily made an educated guess that a State of Play will happen either this month or next month in March. What I will say here, though, is that I'm hoping that this will be a good State of Play because this is the 30th anniversary for PlayStation. A few months ago, there were some rumors floating around that PlayStation has plans for some of their classic franchises in 2025 to celebrate their anniversary. And I don't know if I believe those rumors per se, but in the back of my mind, I'd like them to be true. We'll talk more about that here in a bit with the poll of the day. But there are a few games that comes to mind that, I do think has a chance of being here. One is for Metal Gear Solid Delta. We still don't have a release date for that game, but because of its history on PlayStation consoles, I think a state of play would be a pretty good place to reveal that information. Now, there's also Fair Games. I don't have a lot of confidence in PlayStation's live service games, but, it is their next big live service game. So depending on how far along it is in development, they could show it in what it actually is. We really don't know too much about it yet, other than it looks like some kind of heist game. Now, there's also Phantom Blade Zero. That game does actually look really good, and it is a 2025 PlayStation console exclusive. Again, much like Metal Gear Solid, we still don't have a release date. So that could be a potential reveal, and they do have a couple of big first-party games that we do know about that's planned for 2025, being Death Stranding 2 and Ghost of Yotei. So those are also two potential announcements. But this is where I'm going to kind of caution tempered expectations, and the reason I say that is simply because this seems to be a PlayStation State of Play, and not a PlayStation Showcase. For those that don't know, there is a difference between the two. State of Plays tend to be smaller in scope, so that's why I'm saying to temper your expectations a little bit, just kind of keep that in mind. But, just in terms of rumors, there's a lot of things that could happen here, whether that be, one of those PlayStation classics, Final Fantasy IX remake. We've heard a lot about that. Could that finally be revealed here? But either which way, hopefully we'll get an official PlayStation State of Play announcement relatively soon. Now, on that note, let's go and take a look at the poll of the day where I asked you all, which smaller PlayStation Classic franchise would you like to see come back? And this was actually a pretty close race between Sly Cooper and Jak and Daxter with the lead. And, I completely understand that. I'd like to see both of these games get a revival as well. But if I had to just choose one, I'd probably go with Sly Cooper. For me personally, and this is just my opinion, but I view it as a little bit more unique for its genre because it's got that stealth-based mechanic to it. There's really not another platformer out there like it, and I think it's also one of the better child-friendly franchises. It's a great stealth-based platformer for kids, so that's why it gets my vote. I think that they need more family-friendly titles, and this would be a great, great game to have under their catalog. Like I said, though, if they did go with Jak and Daxter, I'd really be happy with either or. Anyways, though, that's going to be this episode, but until next time, make sure to subscribe, ring that bell, and peace out.